And we're live. We're recording again. Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you doing, man? How are you feeling on this Friday evening?
I'm doing okay. I'm ready for the weekend for sure. I've been studying up programming, and my head hurts a little bit. This is just complicated stuff, so I'm definitely ready for a break and to talk about something kind of fun and mysterious.
I mean, my head breaks from this case, to be honest with you, after this podcast has me feeling like I'm in a constant loop of last minute research for university tests. Because that's how I feel on every Friday nowadays. But it's fun. It's definitely fun for me. And yeah, my head breaks from all of the different theories that we have regarding today's topic. Today we are talking about the Dyatlov Pass Incident. So we have a pretty strict, I would say, plan to go over what we want to go over in this case because there's so much details. I was actually thinking we could probably make this into a multiple episode series down the line sometime. Like there is this one on missing Maura Murray case where they have literally hundreds of episodes regarding one case. I feel like the Dyatlov Pass incident could definitely be this. You could definitely do the same thing with this case, but I think we just want to improve upon our first attempt, which is, I believe, episode 7, if I'm not mistaken, where, it was one of our first episodes. We did it way back in 2019, and I just want to make sure that we improve upon it. So without any further ado, give us a quick breakdown of the case before we jump into the meat of this story.
Yeah, so this is an interesting case. It's like you said, we did a much more play-by-play episode. It was one of our very first episodes. That's why we did it, because it was just such a compelling case. And I feel like it's probably been almost exactly 10 years since I even heard about this case. So I don't know that before maybe 10 years ago, at least over here in the United States, if people knew about it, or if they did. It's been the past probably 15 years. I think it was classified for a long time. So that's a little bit of background. So Dyatlov Pass Incident is a really mysterious event where it happened in the former Soviet Union, and it happened essentially in Siberia, in the northern Ural Mountains. And what it happened is you had 9 Russian hikers, and when I say hikers, I don't really mean hiking. I mean more like hardcore snow camping and hiking with just the stuff in your back. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
What these just kind of normal. I mean, they were all kind of smart people or experienced hikers. They were mostly students.
Could I just step in here?
Yeah.
I want to mention one thing about students in the Soviet Union. So students in the Soviet Union are not like students in modern day times, because my grandfather was actually managed to become a student in the previous Soviet Union state, the Soviet Republic of Lithuania. And I think in his village where he grew up, there was around, I would say, 300 kids, and only 3 kids from that village went to study. The other people moved to the docks. You know what I'm saying? They had to lift crates, do all sorts of things, but only 3 people went from 300. So there's a 1% chance that you will become a student in the Soviet Union, something along those lines. Obviously, for different Soviet republics, there were different situations, but it was really hard. So, I mean, these students were literally the elite of the Russian society. You know what I'm saying? They didn't come from elite backgrounds, but in terms of their abilities, they were elite. I mean, some of the characters we will be talking about today, at 19, were working on top secret projects. At 19, I was watching YouTube videos. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's a different contrast.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, they were all studying kind of complex stuff too. They were studying like energy economics and sometimes like hard sciences. So it was interesting, and like you said, kind of a brilliant group of people for the most part. And they had, I think we'll talk about it later, they all had very different backgrounds too. Some came from poor families, some came from I guess, well-to-do families by Soviet standards. One of them even came from a former French aristocratic family, where the father had been persecuted internally for some reason in the Soviet Union.
Right.
But for whatever reason, what was going on is there's these different classifications of this snow camping, hiking thing that they're doing, and the way you would meet these different, like they would level up basically, and these different tiers, and the way you did it was doing big, crazy, multi-day camping in the snow, hiking up mountains kind of camping trips, and you get points. So all of them, for various reasons, they all knew each other except for one person who was the oldest one of the group. The rest of them were all within a few years of each other. They were all, I think, late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
And there were 9 of them. So yeah, they go.
Initially, I just want to step in
yep.
for 1 second. Initially, there were 10 of them. As we all know, that one person, I believe his name was Yuri Yudin, he turned back, and he is like the only surviving person of this hiking trip. So
yeah, he had some kind of health issues. I
Yeah.
guess he might have had multiple health issues, and yeah, it turned out he was lucky that he had them, because it saved his life. So
yeah,
they go on this trip, and I'm gonna really try to make my way through these Russian names. So apologies to Russians and Siberians if I mangle the names. But all these people were from except for one, were from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and they were going on a hike that was through a pass that passed this mountain. It's not even really a mountain. It's more like, or it's a pretty small mountain called the Kholat Sayakal, I think is the way you say it.
yeah. I think you just said it better than I could. So let's just leave it at that.
And the group's leader was Igor Dyatlov, who apparently had quite strong leadership qualities for somebody of his age. He was not super old. I think he was in his like 24 at the time. But he was very respected by the group, and he had, they all knew each other from this university, and this pass eventually gets named after him. It was not called that at the time. So I guess the very mysterious thing about this is, this is kind of a normal thing. Apparently the area they were hiking, they were by far not the first ones ever to do this trip. This was kind of a normal qualification run for this kind of hiking. And, you and I were talking about this before. It's so funny because, like, I was in Boy Scouts for too many years. And, I probably, if you add up all the days of, like, summer camp and normal camping and snow camp and all the other stuff we did, it was probably months of my life. But we never did anything like this. Like, we always had cars. We always had toilets of some form, whether it was a chemical toilet or
Normal
an actual
food.
Facility. Yeah, outhouses or something. Yeah, normal food. Well, I mean, we would backpack. We would
Right.
sometimes some trips were backpacks. Like we backpacked in the Grand Canyon. We had, like trail food where we'd have to cook it,
Yeah.
add water, etc. But yeah, I mean, these guys are packing. We never had to pack like more than, let's say, a couple days worth of food in our back. These people are doing it. These guys and gals are doing it like a multi-day, like I think it was like a 15-day trip or something.
Multi-week
Is that right?
trip, you could almost say.
Multi-week trip. Wow. I mean, through snow. So that's just exhausting. I mean, how many calories must you be burning? How do you even keep enough calories
Man,
to do that?
I wanted
Yeah.
to mention one thing. They stopped at one of the village, because how they got to the trekking place. Well, they started off at taking a train, I believe, to this one slightly smaller city from the city that they started off from. They started at Yekaterinburg, modern day Yekaterinburg. It was previously called Sverdlovsk. So when I was researching this case, I was like, what is this Sverdlovsk? Why are they referring to it as if it was like a big known city in Russia? But then I realized that it was, modern day Yekaterinburg, and that's a big city, that's a big famous city in Russia. It's in the middle of Siberia, and they went initially to this smaller city, or like a town, and then they took they rented out like sleds, something along those lines, to go to this other like abandoned loggers camp, something like that. But during their trip, the only thing they were eating, or like mainly the things that they were eating, were loaves of bread. So it wasn't like energy bars, Red Bull, energy drinks. They were literally running on bread.
Yeah, it's like the old-fashioned version of carbo loading, like what people would do for before a marathon. People used to eat like big pasta meals and stuff. I don't know if they still do that anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so it's pretty amazing. I mean, I was laughing about this, but I am serious. I don't even know, like, in this crazy blizzardy snow that they're going in, how do you even go to the bathroom? Like, where do you set up a tent so you're not, you know what I mean? It's kind of disgusting, but like, what are the logistics of even properly using the bathroom, and that, and you're under like 4 different layers. It doesn't sound.
I mean, the brushes probably, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, do you dig a hole? I don't know.
Nah.
Is the snow blowing all over you? Like, while that's happening? It doesn't sound fun. It doesn't, but this was their idea of fun. So it's pretty interesting. But what happens is, about, a few days into the trip, they're supposed to be passing through a pass. And by a pass, I mean like a low point between 2 mountains. So,
Yeah.
you're trying to get from point A to point B and then back. And they get a little disoriented, not totally unusual, given, probably the lack of terrain features, and maybe that they hadn't done this trip before necessarily. And they get disoriented, and they end up actually walking up a hill, up a mountain, instead of along the low pass part that they thought. So they made kind of a wrong turn.
We could see it
And when
actually.
they realized that,
I just want to step in
Yeah.
here for one more second. We could actually see this mistake on this map. As you can see, like the purple line, for everyone who is watching this podcast on our YouTube channel, Solvable Mysteries Podcast on YouTube, you could pretty much see the map where there are 2 lines. Now, as you can see, like there was this one line. This was their route, their initial route, and as you can see, the purple line is where they should have gone to reach. You know what I'm saying? To reach Mount Otorten, because that was their destination. But I believe they made a mistake. Now, there's some people thinking that they didn't make a mistake. This was like a decision that they made, but I think the overall general consensus is that it was a mistake on Igor Dyatlov's, the Trek's leader part. He makes a wrong turn. As you can see, he deviates quite badly, to be honest with everyone. They start climbing up a mountain, then they try to turn around. On January 31st, they set up camp here, and then they continue on climbing into the mountain. So initially, the whole trek, well, it seemed like even if they managed to survive the mysterious events of the day when they died, even then they would have had like a hard time, you know what I'm saying, like finishing the trek. They may have to turn around at that point, regardless if they survive or not,
I wonder, I'm looking at it, it looks like it's only about a 30-something degree deviation from the course. I could see how he got confused, because it almost looks like there's a similar dip. You know what I mean? Like there's that little mountain peak right there where the star is in your map, and it looks like he was supposed to go to the right, and he went to the left of it. Instead, it almost looks like they could have gone back down the hill, you know what I mean, and rejoined that purple line.
Yeah.
From where they were, but who knows what the train was like.
Yeah.
In real life, I mean, it's not a trail, so maybe that's the downside. But yeah, so here's where I guess the real mystery is that what happens is that night, some really mysterious events happen, and as we're going to get into, as a result of whatever these events were, you see what looks like evidence of a lot of activity that doesn't make sense. And especially given how experienced these people were, they're very experienced hikers. And what happened that night eventually led to their deaths. And really what the question has been from when this happened, and this happened, what was it, 1959. So, kind of at the as the Cold War was really heating up, and this is part of the reason why it was sort of hidden from our view here in the States. But even in Russia, or in Soviet Union, it was kind of classified for a long time. It feels like the truth wasn't really out there, and not. I don't mean necessarily in a conspiratorial way. There's a lot of things that they didn't publicize in Soviet Union, but for whatever reason, it may or may not have been a conspiracy to hide some facts in this. And I think this is what everyone always. This is why this has become one of the most famous kind of mysteries or paranormal mysteries for a show like ours, or really for this topic in general. Is it just seems so weird. You have these 9 people who lose their lives in what seems like either a violent or a mysterious way. It's people that freeze to death, that really, at least it looks like they froze to death, who really shouldn't have frozen to death, even though the weather was bad. It kind of defies your initial thought of how you would think of these people and how they would react to the situation. It seems like they massively panicked in a situation that they should have been super confident in. So
Right.
I think that's probably a good summary. And once again, if you really want to hear the play-by-play, I do encourage everybody to go back to our original episode, number 7. But I think that we are going to go over the facts of this case enough over the next hour that you will essentially have gotten the same material right now.
Right, exactly. I mean, the last thing in the summary, I think we should sort of go through the scene of what actually happened. So they set up a tent, right, at what I would say a ledge, like a slight ledge. I think I have a infographic here somewhere. As you can see, where it says tenda, I think that's like tent or something like that. At the middle of the night, on I believe the day was February 2nd. At the middle of the night on February 2nd, they apparently cut their way out of the tent from the inside and run down the slope towards the tree-line area, which is approximately 1.5 kilometers away. I'm not really sure what it's in like miles for our American audience. I believe that is like 4 miles, I would say, maybe a little bit more than that. So they run this amount of like distance to the tree line for some reason at the middle of the night. Now, the general consensus and what the lead investigators that actually reopened this case back in 2019, and this is a good time for us to do this case because when we did episode 7, the Russian 2019 investigation has not yet came to a conclusion. Now, this investigation concluded in 2020, so they probably were like really rushing to finish this case because they had like coronavirus and things like that. They didn't want to like, I'm saying, like focus on these things too much. So they concluded that it was an avalanche. Now, they only investigated 3 potential outcomes, like a hurricane, an avalanche, and I believe Catabatic Winds or something like that. So they only investigated natural outcomes in the first place. So I think for this podcast, we could group all of the natural explanations into one and just make it seem like a natural explanation, because for me the real mystery in this case is whether it was a man-made event, like it was some shady conspiracy stuff like potential Soviet Union intervention. There are some theories about CIA, there are some theories about the Russian Bigfoot, there are some theories about UFOs. So these are one types of like theories. And then we have the natural explanations. I mean, you could say that, a Russian Bigfoot and the UFOs are natural explanations, but let's group them to the more conspiratorial ones, at least for this episode. So that's the real mystery. The real mystery is why, at the middle of the night, they cut their tents open and run 1.5 kilometers down the slope without shoes. Some of them had shoes, or at least one shoe on their foot. Really poorly dressed, in temperatures at like minus 25 degrees Celsius, which I'm not sure how much that is in Americans Fahrenheit metric system or whatever, but like I'm pretty sure everyone could understand that it was freezing cold. They run down to this tree line, and that's when they die in mysterious circumstances. Some people die at the beginning of the tree line, at this mysterious cedar tree that we will be looking at. Some people die apparently trying to make their way back towards the tent that he left in such a crazy manner. And some people actually died a little bit farther away from the cedar tree in the opposite direction of the tent, so moving a little bit deeper into the forest, digging themselves a makeshift den, which looks like a professionally made den, and then dying there in super mysterious circumstances, where some of their insides were completely crushed, like ribs broken, missing eyeballs, missing tongues. The way they died in that tent is really the big mystery here, because that's sort of is the catalyst for all of these conspiracy theories. I feel like that's the real mystery here. So I don't know, man. I think that is it for our rough estimation, like rough summary of the events that went down, and I think we could get into it now. As I can see from the script that you have prepared for this week's episode, you have actually outlined some of the comments that some of the users actually left on our first episode. So, I mean, if you don't mind, we could probably just go through them pretty quickly, because some of these comments were like really, really interesting. So, you want to take it away on that end a little bit?
Yeah, so no surprise, this is probably one of our most commented episodes, and we're always really appreciative of user participation and reactions and the feedback we get. So, I think it's a lot of these theories. I mean, though there were some surprises in there, a lot of them I think are clustered around exactly the kind of grouping that you gave. So, for instance, there were a lot of theories around like Soviet or government military cover-ups. So, like for instance, user Godzilla said that one of the survivors, the only survivor, Yuri, he always thought it was military involvement, and he said that some of the clothing that was recovered didn't look like it belonged to his group, and he thought it was military, and thought maybe it had something to do with some kind of top secret weapons testing, and then subsequent cover up that happened in the area. And I think it was, on the other hand, you had people that said things like, well, it was completely natural. I think Jeff Greenwald, who's another user, said that they got disoriented, they got turned around, it was snowing heavily, and they basically, I'm adding this onto his comments a little bit, but I think he's implying that it was completely accidental, that there was something that caused them to panic, maybe like fear of avalanche. I know is not a common theory. And for whatever reason, once you get out there, like you said, into the freezing cold, I think your ability to think rationally, and the fact that maybe if you're not fully dressed, you can have things like paradoxical undressing, and that would cause some of what we've seen. It doesn't explain everything.
I mean, could I step in here?
Yeah.
I actually personally feel strongly against the paradoxical undressing theory, because my research led me to believe that basically, when I don't in particular remember if we talked about paradoxical undressing on episode 7, but we have probably, right? Okay, so now I feel like that was definitely not the case, because I feel like one of the main reasons why we talked about paradoxical undressing as one of the explanations for their death was because some of the people at the cedar tree, as we can see, I will show the footage, the image of the cedar tree, had their clothes removed, but at the same time, these people's clothes that were on other people, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like the people that initially died at the cedar tree, that were like probably the most poorly dressed, which were both Yuris in this case, their clothes have been put on by some other members, you know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, and there were actually some of the members had like there was concrete evidence that they were trying to protect some parts of their limbs. One of the women, in this case, actually wrapped one of the Yuris that died near the cedar tree, I believe, sweater around her foot, trying to like protect her foot that was probably like freezing like really heavily. So I mean, there were these types of details that would sort of lead me to believe that this was not paradoxical and dressing. And I think just in general in the Dyatlov Pass community of like people that are interested in this case, I think everyone sort of is leaning towards that was not the case. So I mean, I've seen some evidence to think the same.
Okay, that's definitely good feedback, I think, on that theory, because I'd always leaned that way, but it is good to kind of hear that additional information. So then, I mean, we have some theories that I think got into a little more of the less common. So user George Street said that that there was a YouTube channel video covering this where a medium, so I don't know if this is a psychic or something, someone said that their theory was that these hikers were killed by the pets of a group of gray aliens who were exploring that area in Russia. Those animals were out of control, and these gray aliens had to ask for help since the Russian army took them prisoners. It also involves wormholes. I mean, so it's there's a lot of detail in that theory. I mean, it certainly sounds like something a medium might say.
Right.
You know, that's sort of an Area 51-ish theory. I mean, you know, I don't know. It's a good. I think there's a movie. I think it's called The Devil's Pass that was made kind of loosely based. It's like a science fiction story based loosely on this story as sort of the base of it. And I think it might be something similar. I mean, some of the sci-fi aspects are somewhat similar. I think in that movie it was a teleportation experiment or something.
Right. But just in general, this theory, like, it's all speculation, right? Do you have an actual?
There's no evidence, right? So yeah, it's just something. I mean, you know, you and I could have gone on YouTube and got a Ouija board and you know, like, or through darts at a board with topics and conjure something out of it. It's interesting. It's fun to think about. And then on the other hand, another user, Ben Firthy, said that this is something I think that might overlap a little bit with what we're talking about today. Is he says that methanol poisoning made the group blind, so that he's implying that the liquor they had wasn't distilled properly. It's not super unusual. That is true. That's one of the problems with moonshine liquor. If alcohol, what happens is when you boil alcohol, the first fumes that you condense off of it are actually the kind that's poisonous to humans. So I think it's methanol instead of ethanol, or what, maybe vice versa. Anyways, yeah, that's the whole thing with moonshine is you have to wait till alcohol hits a certain temperature before what you distill off of it is consumable by humans. So anyway, his theory was methanol poisoning made the group blind. The poisoner had already sabotaged a nuclear facility, which I think would be why there was radioactivity on the clothing of two of the individuals. And then a KGB agent was inserted into the group to find information. And he says, hope that gets you started. Now onto some difficult problems.
I remember this comment. Yeah.
Well, it is interesting because it did actually get us started in terms of, or you know, we did actually end up going in that direction for some of the research that we ran into, but that was funny. And then finally, I'll just speed through the rest of these. User Elemental Entity said the polywoggle got him, and the polywoggle means the unknown. So it was pretty funny. He was just joking, but he says he believes they were cut out of the tent. Now here's something I just interject my own thing when I was researching one of the sources you gave, Juras. Is that it is interesting. At first, when they were researching this, and they thought that maybe other humans did it, namely the Mansi people, the indigenous people of the area, They were kind of operating under the theory that maybe they'd been violently attacked, and that's why there were cuts in the tent. And what was weird was I don't think the investigator really knew that much about like fabric analysis. But what happened was he had a seamstress that had to come on hand to make a repair to his uniform or his clothing. And the seamstress actually looked at the tent, and the seamstress is like, oh, wait, no, that was cut from the inside. Like, I'm an expert on, cutting fabric, and I can tell you the way it looks.
Whoa.
It's pretty clear.
That's crazy. That's pretty crazy.
That's pretty crazy because it makes you wonder, like, has that ever been double checked? Like, are they just doing this purely on what this random seamstress said in 1959? You know what I mean? Or it's kind of like have we been? Is that sort of a house of cards assumption going on there that that's really what happened? It is interesting to think about. But I guess I would like to think that they had someone else check that and they didn't just go off of this one person's opinion. But other than that, he's leaning towards the military cover-up. And finally, there was someone that gave Cat from the Canals gave a very in-depth explanation that I think very heavily overlaps with what you're about to talk about. Anyway, so I think this is just a recap saying that I think a lot of people did not find the conventional explanation, which I know I was leaning towards at the end of our last episode on this. A lot of people were very dissatisfied with the conventional findings and explanations.
Right. I mean, let's get into the theory. So, as you've mentioned, that last commenter, Cat from the Canals, actually did a really good, I would say, and it's like detailed points in the comment that made me really think about this case in a different way. So if she's still watching our channel, and listening to our podcast, she did so back in 2019. I'm not sure if she still is with us, but if you are, thank you so much, Cat from the Canals. And I guess now we can get into the theory. So the first theory that we would like to talk about is the KGB agents controlled environment. So for this theory, I think we have to go through three particular characters in this case that are of interest because they are pretty much, people think that they were KGB spies and things like that. So the first guy I would like to talk about is Alexander Sergeyevich Kolevatov. So basically, Alexander Sergeyevich Kolevatov, this guy right here, a quick backstory. He was born into a pretty well-renowned family in the Soviet Union, but his parents, I believe, fell out of favor with their local state officials. I believe his father got into some legal trouble and whatnot. He was living in a really good apartment, then he was living really poorly in circumstances where he almost died but managed to struggle his way and survive. Then somehow, now this piece of information is missing from his biography, or at least the type of biography that we can find on the internet. He manages at the age of 19 to work at a top secret government nuclear project as basically a chemist, or in the anatomy, no, not with atoms and whatever. At 19, his salary was almost twice as big as the average Russian's salary, and he was living in one of the nicest new apartments in Russia, Moscow. And today that area is apartments there costs as much as they do in London. So he was living the high life at 19.
Look at that! Look at this picture! Look at that big head he's got. No wonder.
Exactly.
He's a genius.
I think he might have been an actual genius. So people think that he was a KGB implant at that point. Another character that we have to talk about is Yuri Alexevich Kiriwashenko. So basically this man right here. So Yuri Alexevich Kiriwashenko was one of the guys that died at the cedar tree initially. And also an interesting part in this theory is that actually in the autopsy of his body, they found his own hand skin stuck in between his teeth. So this indicates that he was either trying to eat his own hand, which I obviously don't think that was the case. I think he was trying to bite his own hand just to see if he could feel anything. So I mean, they were in dire straits. That's definitely what I'm getting from his autopsy. Now, his father was a really big time construction dude in, modern day Yekaterinburg, and they had a really nice apartment in the city center. So also, this guy right here, Yuri, was actually sent to clean up some toxic waste from a nuclear facility explosion at also 19 for some reason. So your thoughts on that, man? I think that's a pretty hardcore thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because back then they didn't know a lot about the ill effects of radiation, but now I don't know if his parents would be so happy about exposing such a young person who hasn't had kids yet to big doses of radiation.
Exactly. And then the last person who is of big time interest in terms of the, I guess, Kgb implant theory is this guy, the eldest member of the trekking group, who was Semyon Alexandrovich Zolotoryev. Nickname was Sasha. So Sasha was 38 years of age, I believe, at the time of his death, or maybe 37. Well, his birthday was, I think, coming up regardless. He was like a World War II veteran, and he had all sorts of like Russian war tattoos. I think we've talked a little bit about him prior to recording. During the time when he was at war, for his age group, there was like a 3% chance of survival. So, this guy was hardcore, that he was, managed to survive all of that. How he ended up going in this trekking group with everyone, well, he was initially trying to become a professional soldier after the war, but it sort of didn't pan out because every single military academy that he went to after World War II sort of shut down, because right after World War II, the Russian economy had to be sort of put on life support, and everyone had to like sort of focus less on the military aspects of the country, the newly formed Soviet Union or whatever. Well, Soviet Union was formed back then, but like given all the new territories that he acquired after World War II and things like that. So he tried 2 times. The first time the military academy shut down, and the second time the military academy shut down again. So he then moves to Yekaterinburg, modern day Yekaterinburg, and he sort of becomes like a professional, like a trekker, like tour guide, something along those lines. And he went to this trip with the Igor Dyatlov's group just so he could get a rank up, as you've mentioned prior. You have to like sort of finish this trek to become like the 3rd level trekker, like the highest level that you could acquire at that time in the Soviet Union. And so he just wanted to do that. I thought it was interesting how he was not the leader of the group, because he was probably the most experienced out of all of them. But then at the same time, I mean, he didn't know the other people as well as Igor Dyatlov, so maybe that was the case. So the general theory about the Kgb implants is that these 3 people somehow have been Kgb guys, and they were sort of implanted in the Igor Dyatlov's group to conduct some research, and there was some mentions that they were probably going to meet some CIA people in there. I personally don't think that this was the case, because I just feel like, there's just not enough evidence. I mean, the backstories, sure, they are pretty crazy. I mean, but at the same time, being a student in the Soviet Union was pretty crazy. So you couldn't just have like a normal background and become a student back then. You sort of have to be an exceptional human being to become a student. So that's who they were, and I just think that's how we should explain the Kgb controlled environment theory. I mean, your opinions on this theory?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. It does explain sort of some of the sudden imposition of him on the group, and I mean, on one hand, like you said, they are all exceptional people to be that kind of student. So maybe it is just like, if you go to Harvard, you're going to have a lot of people who are the best, whatever, at their high school, and student body president, things like that. So maybe that's why the college kind of selects for individuals. But yeah, you had kind of this weird collection of super young people who had been strangely enmeshed in like really sensitive facilities. Like,
Right.
I mean, even now a nuclear facility is a pretty high security special place. But in 1959, a nuclear facility was about as high tech as things got.
During the Cold War, that's pretty crazy.
during the Cold War, when literally people are being executed on both sides. Like we executed people, and so did the Russians for giving away secrets around this stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
So
It's
this.
also just
yeah. Finish up, man. Finish up.
So also with Sasha, it's interesting because like he was the only non-student. I mean, we were looking at his history. He's a lot older than everybody. He's also been through the most in life. Like he was, in the war. His age group, literally only 3% of the people that have been drafted from his age group, if that makes sense, had survived. So he'd already beat the odds. He'd already been through some really tough stuff in his life. He had a lot of weird tattoos that seemed to allude to some kind of brothership. I don't know if it was just fellow soldier stuff or something more. He fought for the NKVD, which was sort of it had two purposes. So one was, they were sort of like the secret police of the military, but like if they thought that you weren't fighting hard enough or that you ran away from your unit, they also ran what were called penal battalions. So penal battalions they took everybody that they thought ran away the last time or was being punished for some reason, and they might not even give you a gun, and they go, okay, run over there towards the Germans, and then, if you pick up a gun off the ground, well, go ahead and use it, but, you're going to fight regardless.
Yeah, I mean, that's Russia right there in this World War II.
So I guess my final thing was just that, I mean, unlike the others, he was actually doing this. If he wasn't doing this for KGB purposes and some secret mission, he was doing this for occupational reasons. So he was a tour guide, so he needed, it would be to his advantage to get this higher qualification.
Right, exactly. I mean, so that's probably one of the bigger theories out there, so we had to mention it. Leave your comments in the comment section or contact us if you have any more information regarding the KGB agent controlled environment theory. The other one is hikers mistaken for Gulag fugitives. Now, there was a Gulag near where the people actually trekked, where the Igor Dyatlov group was found dead. I mean, it could sort of make some sense that maybe some military people thought that these were Gulag fugitives, but I feel like the average person in the Gulags is so vastly different from the group that was trekking. I think it would be really hard to sort of think that these people, well prepared, backpacks and everything, real good equipment, makeshift radios, clear signs of really intelligent people. I mean, everyone here was pretty much a genius. I think it would be pretty hard to mistake them for Gulag prisoners. I don't want to stay here for too long just because of that reason. I mean, you want to add anything to this? Do you think it's...
it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Neither do me. Okay, so now we have military tests with radio Sundays. Now, I'm assuming that this is a theory that sort of, or we could definitely mesh it into one, because we want to save time, especially because we want to save our audience time, because we appreciate them listening to the show. So let's mesh the whole general military test theory into one place, into one thing, I would like to say. So that thing would be that there were either some sort of gas bombs being tested in the area where the Dyatlov Pass group was sort of trekking, or there were, now this is the first time I was hearing about these types of contraptions, the Russian military was probably testing in the same area at some point, these parachute mines that they would sort of throw out of airplanes, military airplanes. And you being the airplane guy on this show, I think you are you could probably chime in here, but I will just finish the theory that they sort of were testing these airplane parachute mines that would sort of explode still in the air, like they would explode before hitting the ground, and maybe some of these explosions triggered panic in this group where they had to like rush out of their tent. I mean, maybe they knew what was happening and they thought that those explosions will cause an avalanche, which I don't really believe, because the mountain side that they were like sort of camping on was not known for avalanches, and actually a lot of scientists also state that the place where Igor Dyatlov's trekking group set up camp, it can't really be hit by a avalanche. So I also am a strong like denier of the avalanche theory myself. So I mean, in your opinion, Glenn, could there have been military tests, particularly in parachute mines, that sort of scared them away and led them to run down to the tree line area?
So the evidence for that was that same. I think the same investigator with the seamstress, or one of the party, when they came to look at it, they noticed that the tops of the trees had burn marks or were singed, and they were wondering what could have caused that. There were some rumors about different weird fireballs and things in the area, and it is worth mentioning that someone else talked about this, because this is so far north. The way the magnetic fields work in the Earth, plus just the weird things passing through our atmosphere, do a combination of making a lot of weird phenomena that if you weren't someone like this person that the quote's from, who was, I think, like a physicist or something, or someone involved in the physical sciences, he said, well, I would have thought it was supernatural or something else if I didn't know better, because of all the weird visual effects and things that happen. And, like, it's also an area with a lot of decomposing organic matter and things like that. The tundra and taiga and all these weird terrain you have in Siberia, certainly it's like a weird combination of stuff becoming really wet, then frozen, then really hot in the summer. It's like a lot of, let's call them biochemical changes. But I guess the one thing I do wonder about the bomb theory is, okay, it would have to be some kind of fuel air bomb without shrapnel, because if, like, case in point, the bodies that we find, the clothing isn't shredded, right? So they're crushed. It looks like there's been some kind of maybe potentially a concussive force. I think they said at one point it almost looked like they've been hit by a car, like it was that kind of damage. But the clothing isn't shredded or burned. So that's my question: is if it's an explosion,
right,
where's the shrapnel? Because that's what the way bombs work usually is. It's not just the explosion. What kills you is, there's for sure the explosion can rip you to pieces, but often what actually kills you is they wrap fragmentary material around the explosion, and when it goes off, the fragments are what pierces your body, almost like you got hit by 100 bullets.
Right. I mean, I didn't even think about there not being any shrapnel. Now, this is the part of the theory of the case, I mean, the podcast as well, where we sort of have to talk a little bit about how the 9 people died, because to make this thing that you just told us make more sense. So from this map right here, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you could pretty much see how the people died. So we have allegedly we have 2 people, Yuri Kiriwashenko as well as Yuri Doroshenko, dying at the initial cedar tree, as you can see. So these are the first people that died, and they had like the worst clothing out of all of them. It is strongly believed that all of the 9 trekkers at some point were at this cedar tree. Now, for some reason, 3 of the people, including the leader of the group, Igor Dyatlov, his then girlfriend, Zenaida Kolmogrova, as well as Rustem Slobodin, they sort of it almost seemed like they were trying to make their way back to the tent, but they didn't make it. Zenaida almost made it halfway through, so that's a big, that's kudos to her for, the attempt. They all died what seems to be on their way back to the tent. And then we also have the 4 people dying at the same area. These 4 people, Lyudmila Dubina, we have Alexander Kolevatov, so basically the guy that was like 19, already in Moscow working on top secret projects. We have Semyon Zolotoryev dying at this makeshift den, the Russian like soldier veteran. And then we have that Nikolai, I don't even want to pronounce his name, Tybeks, Nikolai Brigonole, something like that. So that this is the guy where you remember you told us about the one of the trekkers having like French aristocrats parents. So this was the guy, and pretty much they all died in this makeshift den. So in this makeshift den, a lot of people, such as Semyon Zolotoryev, had his eyeballs missing. Lyudmila Dubina had her tongue missing. And I believe the other, basically 3 of these people had like pretty much crushed like ribs, crushed insides, which would sort of definitely not correlate with a natural cause of death, like a natural death from like exposure. But that's one of the reasons I was thinking that they probably died because of a bomb explosion. But now that you sort of gave me this explanation that where's the shrapnel, could they have been testing bombs that were not that didn't produce shrapnel? Do such bombs exist? Or back then?
So there's I think even back then, so there is a special kind of bomb called a fuel air bomb. Fuel air bomb, how it works is there's usually a parachute over it, so to slow its descent. And the way it works is, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, gasoline or petrol, depending where you live. It's highly explosive, but gasoline isn't really that explosive in its liquid form. What's dangerous about gasoline, this is why you have to put it in a container, special container that's sealed, is that it very quickly evaporates and becomes an aerosol. And much like lots of other things that become aerosol, but especially so, I forget what the calculation was, but I think a gallon of gasoline, when it turns into a vapor, is like worth X number of sticks of dynamite, literally. So
Jesus Christ, that's
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll even see this happen with grain silos. Like grain silos explode every once in a while because just all those little particles of like corn or wheat or whatever, with just like when it's all mixed in the air, when there's like when you mix air with enough energy.
Yeah.
And anyway, so what happens is you'll have these bombs called fuel air bombs, and they'll use timers and things like that to, right when they get near the ground, parachute pops out. There may be 100 yards or feet off the ground. They let out a gas of explosive or combustible material, and then boom, it goes off. And the explosion, because it happens above, like, it's actually better to have an explosion if you want to hurt something or blow something up. It's better to have an explosion above your target than like level with it, if that makes sense. Like
it does.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Because the ground muffles it, like even that Beirut bombing, accidental bombing that happened, the explosion that went off in Beirut, that was actually far less destructive than if it had happened like over the city. Yeah, like if it happened, it would have crushed the city.
I just wanna step in here now. That definitely then explains a little bit to me the people who died in the den. Because if the initial explosion happened like far away from like their physical bodies, their physical location, somewhere in the sky above them potentially, wouldn't like the shock wave and just in general the massive power, like what is like 6 or 7 times stronger than an explosion of like dynamite TNT or something like that, wouldn't that sort of explain the crushed bodies, crushed ribs, like and things like that? Because it happened far away from them, and these types of bombs do not produce any shrapnel, so it wasn't like some Russian special forces guys just threw a grenade at them, because obviously their bodies would be shattered, but maybe the shockwave of a Russian test, like gas bomb up in the sky, sort of killed them. I mean, that would sort of be hard to explain why the other people of the trekking group do not have these, like fractured ribs and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I still wonder how it is that they don't have, why their clothing isn't singed, or why, I don't know, for some reason I feel like unless they got really unlucky and like just the thing was relatively short range, so maybe the thing happened right over them. I'm just like, why are the other trees not knocked over from this? Why is there not, why is there not
Exactly.
more damage to it, more damage to the ground or melted snow? I don't know. But it's on the other hand, it's bewildering. It's bewildering because you have a couple of these individuals that have really severe injuries, and then when you look at like, well, did an avalanche happen? Is that why they all? That was what we said last time, that maybe they thought an avalanche was going to happen and they were kind of primed. Like maybe they were a little neurotic about it. They were overly nervous, and then it made them panic. But then maybe later, as snow did pile up, it did happen to avalanche in a certain area and do that damage. But I don't know. It's very strange.
I will say that there are a lot of people on the comments on various forums of this case. They all strongly believe, or most of them strongly believe, that the group, this particular trekkers group, was way too experienced to make a rookie mistake, such as running away from an avalanche ill-equipped with clothes, because such experienced trekkers would definitely realize that dying of exposure during to freezing is a lot higher. The danger is a lot higher than that of an avalanche, and I feel like they would have at least brought shoes. Like that's, I would bring shoes, so I think what prompted them to leave the tent was something not like an avalanche, something like really unnatural. That's what I'm thinking. Not necessarily aliens or ghosts, but maybe Russian military activity. I mean, the last thing I want to mention here is that the Russians back in 59, they were all drinking heavily, especially like everyone was drinking. Like if you want to make it up the ladder in the Soviet Union, you had to like drink vodka like 2 times a day, like a liter a day. You know what I'm saying? The more you can drink, the higher your chances of becoming a high ranking state official. So basically, I can definitely see like how some military drill organizers were like drinking vodka at like some sauna, and they were like, okay, so when do we set up like the parachute mine bomb tests? Let's just set it on this date and whatever. Now let's get back to drinking and eating like pickles and things like that. So I'm thinking that could have been the case, that it was a miscommunication between like various organizations in the Soviet Union, which happened like constantly. Soviet Union was not functioning well. It was a super dysfunctional country where nothing really made any sense. So I think that could have been the case. Now, the other fact about this case that I would like to mention here is the fact that I'm not really certain if you've heard about the term called livor mortis, basically blood setting on the side of the body that is pressed towards the ground, which makes sense if you think about it. When you die, basically, and you lay on the ground, the blood will sort of come from the top of your body. So if you're laying on your back, from the front of your face, front of your chest to the back of your body, like blood will start setting, right? So in some of the people, in this case in particular, the people that were trying to make their way back to the tents from the cedar tree, livor mortis had been setting, but on the other side of the body, if you know what I'm saying. Like blood was actually forming in the front, not the back of their bodies. So the only explanation to that is that after a while, when they died and blood was set at the back of their bodies were actually turned around. Did that make sense here, man?
Yeah, I think so. So then the question is, were they turned around by a natural force
Exactly,
or by
exactly.
a, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking this is so crazy, but then I realized it could have just been an animal. It could have been wind. It could have been an avalanche that happened like after the fact. If an avalanche could actually happen there. So I'm thinking. At first I was like, this is a dead giveaway. Like I was really into the conspiracies, but then after a while I was like, I mean, it could have been the wind or something like that.
Yeah, it's just one of the many strange and like almost contradictory clues from this thing. I think it's why I think everyone keeps coming up for more theories about what happened here, because it just is so far from straightforward.
Right. So I mean, I think we've covered like the most plausible theories, or at least things that could sort of be in the realm of like high possibility in terms of like actually the ability of it happening in real life, like the KGB, the Gulag misunderstanding, military tests, which I'm leaning towards. We have special forces theories that they ran into some special forces people that were testing something in the mountains and they had to be killed. I'm thinking that's probably not the case. What do you think about the special forces? I mean, I don't want to be here for too long because I was really
Yeah.
strongly not with the special forces theory.
No, I mean, once again, how are the bodies not showing, well, the clothing at least not showing more damage? I mean, I read the write up. They said, well, they know how to deal damage to people without leaving marks. Here's the one thing I wonder about the theory about them getting attacked by anybody, whether it was because at one point they tried to just say maybe the local indigenous people did it, the Manzi,
Yeah.
and then there was like a whole bunch of stuff that was even like the investigators' first theory, just looking at it, because I guess sometimes some of the indigenous peoples in these areas clash with, let's call it like the ethnic Russians and people from other parts of the Republic. The one thing I wondered is if the weather's so bad, what are they doing out there? I mean, I get that like they live in this environment, so maybe what's like a bad blizzard to somebody from the big city isn't such a bad blizzard, or you're kind of used to it. But I still have to wonder, like, what makes them so immune that they can go out in these crazy conditions that were enough that these people had to hunker down and died of it.
The Mansi, yeah, the Mansi theory. I'm personally also would like to discredit it a little bit because the Mansi were initially in the search party, and actually the Mansi, one of the Mansi hunters actually found the people in the den, because remember, the people on this trekking group, so basically the cedar tree victims and the two people, Igor Dyatlov and his girlfriend, I believe, were found on the same day. Then a few days after the fact, the other person who was trying to make his way back to the tent from the cedar tree was found. I think that was Rustem. And then only almost like 2 months later, the bodies in the tent, in the makeshift den, were found. So and the bodies were found by a Mansi hunter. Also, Mansis are known to be very good, generous people who always help everyone they encounter. So I would say the Mansi people is just strict speculation. I mean, you could think that the Mansi thought that these people were encroaching into their hunting grounds, into their ritual areas, but I'm thinking that that's probably not the case, and someone from the Mansis probably would have told on someone, and things like that. So
Yeah, they even pointed out that a couple things. One was, they found money and other valuable
vodka.
things, the camera, yeah, vodka, the alcohol. They were saying that the alcohol alone probably was more valuable than even the money to the locals in terms of how it was treated. It was treated like essentially the same or better as money. So just the fact that nothing was taken from this group already kind of made it look very unlikely that that they were kind of killed by angry locals, like Deliverance style or something like that. If people in the U.S. that know that movie, So that was weird. And then, at one point they're like, well, maybe these mountains were holy to them. And they're like, nah. Turns out that even the Monty, there's a quote from a Monty saying, nah, there's nothing special about that place. We don't have anything special up that mountain. And people go through there all the time, but we don't care. We just kind of accept that as normal. So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot kind of tilting against it. Now, I will say that someone, because I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, someone could easily say, well, that could be part of the cover up, that, it actually has happened before, also in our country, that sometimes when something happens from one group against another, the government will cover it up because it is contrary to sort of, the we're all one country and we're all getting along agenda. So in the past, Soviet Union has covered up things that were, let's say, inconvenient to that kind of narrative. So that would be what someone would bring up as an objection is, oh, they're just covering it up. So,
Yeah.
It is worth paying that out there. But I don't think so. I think it just, yeah, I mean, if anything, the fact that they had things that were way more valuable than what most people had in these adjoining villages and nobody even touched them. It's kind of funny. It's kind of interesting. It's almost like the Lisa, the Froon case, the two girls from the Netherlands that disappeared. Similar thing where, all their valuables were found and like none of the local people even touched them. Like nobody, you know what I mean? It didn't, it wasn't like their camera turned up in someone's house somewhere. Like
I think that would be a dead giveaway of what happened.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, that was a good episode as well. Okay, so yeah, I'm leaning towards the same. Also, we have UFOs now. We have this picture taken from. Remember that 38-year-old Semyon person, the ex-military World War II veteran. Now, the guy who escaped death, Yuri Yudin, he says that he does not recall Semyon having a photo camera, but a camera was actually found with his body in the den. And this is a strange picture taken from, as you can see on the visuals, man, this is a picture that some people believe shows like aliens or UFOs. Now there are some more pictures regarding this theory also. You can find them online. Basically his camera was broken, was the only camera that was broken, and this is why we got like some strange shots. And I feel like in this type of a situation, I'm thinking, if we like the camera is broken, like are we really gonna try to make alien like seem like it was aliens through a broken camera? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm like, for those of you that look at our Facebook page or look at my Flickr page, I'm an amateur photographer, and all I see here is the same heartbreak that all of us photographers get when our equipment didn't work for the shot we wanted. Yeah, to me that just looks like that could be anything.
Right.
Yeah. So that doesn't. No, the one thing that is interesting though, that did come up in some of that same research you sent me, was one of the investigators did apparently become really obsessed with UFOs afterwards and had made special requests after the fact during his career about, different files. And the speculation was, well, something he saw here set him off, where he ended up going down that rabbit hole, that this became especially interesting to him. I think that's a compelling theory. It's worth thinking about whether there was anything overlapping it. Once again, there's no real evidence. The other thing I would say is there is enough UFO stuff going on in the second half. Well, I would even say from World War II through the second half of the 20th century and now, as we've discussed in our other episodes, there's enough compelling stuff going on in the U.S. alone, let alone Soviet Union, which I'm sure had its own share of stuff going on, that I think anybody with a brain who is kind of curious about things and maybe had the ability to maybe find out would try. Right. So I don't know that is a straight line connection to this case versus just, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so the last theories are really, I would say, not necessarily fringe, but the theories that we could sort of just gloss over and then give our ending pretty much thoughts on the whole case, because we will be wrapping up shortly now. The first theory that I would like to still mention is the infrasound theory, or otherwise the Kármán vortex. Now I will show a picture real quick here. So it's a poor resolution picture. I don't know if you can see, but this picture was taken in South Korea, on the coast of Jeju, pretty much, where there are like Kármán vortexes forming. So basically, when a Kármán vortex is being seen, basically the wind is moving in such directions, usually downwards from a slope or something like that, which would make sense in this case. And it sort of makes an infrasound situation where people stuck in such a wind pattern sort of feel super distressed, and they don't know what to do about it, and they like had to cut. So the theory goes that they are stuck in this wind formation. They start feeling unwell. They had to like cut out the tent from the inside and rush out. The theory doesn't make sense, because why would you run 1.5 kilometers away from it? Why wouldn't you just run down? So, I mean, without stopping here for too long, because we still have some more fringe theories. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it would explain. I mean, I guess I'm going to take a little bit different point of view than maybe just it making them so irrational and a massive panic attack. You know, when you have a panic attack, it can go on for a while. Maybe that would explain why they went so far in such a weird state of undress, cutting them. You know, like, why would you cut your way out of a tent? It just it makes no sense.
Nope.
But on the other hand, one of the other articles I read about this said, hey, there's no real evidence that this has ever really happened, not just in this event, but at all, that these winds have ever driven anybody insane, or I mean, like you can see, like you said, the satellite pictures looks pretty cool, but there's never been any kind of documented evidence of somebody like losing their mind or having this kind of weird effect. It just sounds like it's like a cool theory. It's something that they've thought about, just like a lot of other things, but yeah, not documented.
Okay, so we have teleportation experiment in regards to the movie The Devil's Pass. This movie is really, really heavily hated in the Dyatlov Pass community, and we're gonna move away from it because come on, man, it's some stupid American flick. You know what I'm saying? Like the Devil's Pass. Never gonna watch that crap. We have lightning strike ball lightnings. I mean, this theory in particular doesn't really make sense to me because of the fact of how many coincidences would have happened, like that they are scared of a certain lightning so bad that they rush out of the tent. I mean, maybe the lightning looked like aliens to them, that's why they did that. But then a coincidence would have to happen where this theory sort of explains the both Yuris at the cedar tree dying from electrocution. I mean, I just want to move past away that one. Now is this interesting theory that I firstly thought that this really had something going for it, the stove. Now, Igor Dyatlov was an inventor. He was like a real genius. This is like what I'm talking about when we're saying that people who went to university back then are not the same people that go to university right now, you know. So Igor Dyatlov had made a makeshift stove for the group. And some people speculate that the stove malfunctioned and started like steaming up, or like even like burning inside of their tent. Now, this doesn't really make much sense to me, because sure, the stove can malfunction, and sure, by trying to get away from a burning, malfunctioning stove, you would have to cut your way out of the tent quickly. But why would you run 1.5 kilometers away from a stove? So, I mean, that's how I explain that. Lastly, there are gravity fluctuations, another theory that is super in-depth and crazy, not really certain. The Catabatic Winds, you can catch our episode 7, we talk all about Catabatic Winds. I think there's some merit to it. as well as animal attacks, and pretty much everything else that we have already talked about. So lastly, in this case, I think before we give our last thoughts, there was this one really interesting fact that we have yet to talk about, and I think it's the last thing that we need to talk about before we give our own sort of ideas on what happened, is the fact that some of the bodies had pretty strong discoloration, right? I mean, some of the bodies had purplish discolorations, and some of the bodies had brownish discolorations, or almost like it was a tan. And people at the funerals remember that the bodies were tanned a bit. So what could cause a tan on a dead body in freezing temperatures?
I mean, could it be sunburn? Because you're at the poles. I don't know. I mean, they didn't really have the ozone problems yet, I guess, but the holes in the ozone layers. But I just wonder, just because there's snow doesn't mean there's not sun.
Right.
Could it just be from being out there in the sun all day, from day after day after day? That just
I mean, could be. I was thinking maybe it had to do something with the bomb explosions. So
maybe that's the burning I asked about. Yeah, maybe that. It could be something like that. Also, radiation, whether natural or man-made.
Right.
That there could be some kind of organic damage. So maybe that's why the cloth didn't get affected, but the biological materials did. Also, I think one of the sources. So somebody was saying that one person's theory was it had something to do with these weather balloons being filled with a gas or a fuel that was toxic, and that's true. A lot of the fuels and missiles and rockets and spaceships, it's actually super poisonous. And they were saying that this was this darkening in the skin was a symptom of phosphorus poisoning or something like that. That the bodies had been, and that after it goes through the body, it doesn't leave a lot of signs in the background for toxicology. So it would have, I don't know if it's organic or something. It's something where it can evaporate back out, but except for that one symptom.
Right.
So, yeah, food for thought.
That's some good thoughts, man. That's some good thoughts. I mean, okay, man. At this point, I'm thinking these theories could really go either way, and I think we will need a second coming of these comments on our YouTube channel, especially after this, for people who think that we made mistakes during this podcast. I mean, please let us know in the comments section. I mean, the problem with this case is that there is so much details that we could just keep talking and talking and talking about, and we'd really have to make multiple episodes regarding this case. Now, currently, I will tell you this much: I personally am now shifting away from the natural disaster towards the missiles, man. Towards that something blew them up in the sky, something exploded in the sky like a parachute mine, and the impact maybe caused the people at the den to have fractured ribs. And I guess when we talk about the Dyatlov Pass incident, the biggest mystery here is not necessarily how they died, because I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine a whole bunch of theories on how they died, but the biggest secret here is why did they cut their tent open from the inside and left poorly equipped and drown 1.5 kilometers? So I'm thinking that could have been caused by explosions in the sky. And I think remember that Beirut accident that just happened last month? That explosion would cause me to run out of a tent in freezing temperatures. Multiple explosions like that, and stronger ones as we've talked about, would probably cause me to run 1.5 kilometers away. I would be frightened. My eardrums would be shattered. I don't know what would be happening. The confusion the craziness. I feel like that was the case. That's how I explain it, because there was no signs of an avalanche. There was no signs of any sort of natural phenomenon that could have caused them to run out. And I don't think anything natural would cause them to run out. Maybe like a bear attack. Maybe like a bear. I don't know. A Siberian tiger. But I don't know. I feel like the animal would have left marks on them or something like that. So I'm thinking it's probably the explosions in the sky, the massive explosions, like not just a random like grenade explosion. We're talking about like some almost nuclear type of explosions happening in the sky, and that's why they had to dodge the tent in such a manner. Also, some reports state that other people saw glowing orbs in the sky at the same day of their disappearance, as well as the main investigator of this case was told by Moscow officials to not talk about the things that he saw in the sky as well, because the main investigator also saw these orbs in the sky, and he was strictly told by Moscow officials, do not disclose this information. So I think there was the case was tainted by politics from Moscow, and we don't really got the full picture. I feel like the Moscow was hiding something. This was the height of the Soviet Union Cold War with the US, and that's how I explain it. That's my line of thinking after this second round of research. That's what I'm leaning towards, and I guess now I will hand it over to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I really am trying to rethink this and see. There's still a lot of disturbing stuff. I mean, I still am leaning towards, even though I kind of dismissed it earlier, something like the winds, something like the avalanche. I mean, dying in an avalanche is an awful way to die, and it makes you wonder if they were talking about it a lot. And also, even some of the research we looked at, looks like some of the people like weren't in a super good mood. So I just wonder if some kind of mass hysteria took place where one person started freaking out in the tent, and it was like in the middle of the night, and then the others woke up and they think that they're, like I could see somebody kind of tripping over where they kind of panic and they think they're going out of the tent, but they've gotten turned around in their tent, or they're a little disoriented, and they're like, oh my God, the avalanche is on top of us already. And I guess the only question is, what would make somebody do that? I think the explosions or something like that might kind of accelerate that weird panic where you feel like you have to do something right away. Because to your point, what would make you run off with missing a shoe? Like multiple people run out of their tent having cut their way out.
1.5 kilometers away.
Yeah, which is basically a mile, right?
More than that, I feel like.
Yeah, that's like, crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean that takes like in my best shape of my life, it took me 6 minutes to run a mile. How do you even?
Oh yeah, that's less than a mile. I'm sorry,
that?
guys. That's less than a mile. But yeah.
Is it?
It's less.
1.5 kilometers.
3 kilometers is a mile, something like that. Don't quote me on this.
Is it?
Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna when it's I'm not talking, I'm gonna ask who and see what that is. But yeah, so
Alexa.
It was Alexa. What's 1.5 kilometers in a mile? Yeah, 0.93 miles. Okay, so it's almost a mile. So yeah, it's crazy to me when I think I never really thought about that part. Like I think I'd always assumed when we went over this that the trees were just like a few hundred yards away. 1.5 kilometers is super far. So yeah, maybe I am really leaning towards like there was some kind of weapons test. That's why this thing was always so hush hush, because like somebody messed up for some reason. The only thing I wonder is if the place was known for being like this big, trek through the mountains area. I mean, other than I guess Soviet incompetence, which isn't like too far fetched. Why do weapons testing there? But there was a lot of other stuff going on. There was like I think there was a heavy overlap of this group of people with things that were already top secret. It kind of looks like the Soviet Union was used to kind of having a heavy overlap with like uranium mining and all these other things near these people's lives. So maybe just when you're that big a country and you have resources in certain places and you're trying to get a lot done, yeah, maybe stuff just does get messed up, and some Soviet commander tests the fuel air bombs over in the over in Yosemite. I don't know.
I could see that happening. Like that's, oh my god! Like
Yeah.
Soviet Russia is the epitome of incompetence. I mean, it's what could definitely go down. I mean, they did try to dig as far as they could into the ground just to see what happens. I mean, these types of projects exist in the Soviet Union. So, I mean, okay, so for, final thoughts, I think we still are sort of not 100% in what happened, and I think we never will be in this case, but it's definitely a fun thing to talk about here. If there's some more interesting information regarding this case comes out, we will definitely go back to this case. And yeah, pretty much we gave our final thoughts to you guys. I mean, we would appreciate if you did the same in the comments section. If you have some interesting theories, please leave them in the comment section. I mean, we could definitely even come back to this case down the line sometime. I mean, because it's one of the cases that I'm really interested about talking about every single time we do. And yeah, man, any last thoughts before we sign out?
Yeah, just usual housekeeping. That thank you so much, everybody, for all the many comments this week. Thank you for the Twitter followers that we got. We've hit new benchmarks, and thank you, of course, to our YouTube and podcast subscribers. We're just every week. I know I keep saying this, but we're just getting so much more momentum. So we really do appreciate your feedback. You are the reason why we do this.
Exactly, guys. Stay safe and catch us on the next week's episode. Peace out.